Hey, Bill, how are you today?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit as you're a fairly new person in my world.
Nice to meet you too, and looking forward to our call today.
So you and I are both sitting, beyond neck deep in this crazy AI world, but I like to take things back to sort of the origin story, if you will. So I'd love to go all the way back in time to the beginning of your career. And, before we know you for what you do today, where did you get started? Where'd you go to school? And what was the very first thing you went doing?
Oh gosh, okay. So I went to 3 colleges and came out of school as somebody who had some computer programming and quant skills and who was very interested in developing strategies around finding patterns in data. And turns out that Wall Street rather enjoys those skills and will pay highly for them. And so I came out of school before I graduated, went to work as a quant securities analyst, portfolio manager, head of research for a couple of big institutional buy-side firms. Eventually found my way to the internet. And I've been doing the internet now for 27 years, I think. Long time.
We're just going to geek out for 2 more seconds. So did you think you were going to stay in the investment world and then the internet just disrupted you as much as everybody else around it? Or were you looking to make that shift at some point?
I definitely wasn't thinking in terms of making that shift. What happened for me, that sort of lightning moment for me, was watching a guy doing what I had been doing in a similar trading firm. Went out to Seattle with his wife to go sell books on the internet. And I watched that happen and saw him setting up to sell books. And I said, okay, so for this to be successful, what would have to take place? And I thought about it and I began to see him being successful selling books. And I said, let's pick a different category and something that I think I might know something about. And let's get started, because I'd rather be early than late on this. And I would really regret at 70 looking back saying coulda, woulda, shoulda. This is back in the mid and late 1990s. So I started selling prints and posters and the framing of prints and posters online, called art.com. And art.com for me was the entry point consumer and both B2B and B2C e-commerce. That was my entry point into the world of digital media, marketing, e-commerce, digital.
Love this. Now, as you got that started, and we've chatted about this, most of the time I ask people, what person in business like kicked you into gear or made this profound change on your life. And you had a different answer than most do. Tell us about that.
We're not married to my wife, only I'm married to my wife. So my story is that I had sort of thought this all the way through back at the end of 96 and the very beginning of 97, and told my wife what I thought was going to be happening with the world of the internet and how profound the changes were going to be and what was going to drive it. And that there were many categories that I thought were going to be really opportune for exploiting using this very different way of going to market. And I told her about the idea of creating the world's largest selection of prints and posters and the framing of prints and posters, and why retailers and mail order catalogs were not going to be in a good position to compete in that space. And I went to sleep. 3:00 in the morning that day, that evening, my wife jams her bony elbow into my ribs, wakes me up, and I remember distinctly, like, what's going on? And I immediately thought of the kids. And she said, no, how can you sleep at a time like this? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, what you just told me. She said, how can you sleep? You have to get going on this. I mean, what are you wasting time for?
It's amazing.
Get going. So I jumped out of bed and I went over and I dialed up my dial-up modem on my computer downstairs. And I began to put together what the plan would be for launching what turns out to be the world's largest seller of prints and posters online.
It's amazing. And so tell us about getting that started in the very earliest days, where, there was no internet to use effectively to figure out what everybody else was doing the way we do today. How did you put those first pieces together?
Jeremy, there was a bit. Back then, what was selling online was sex.
It might be big on the internet. I hear it.
It wouldn't be totally obvious, though, because back then the modems were 2400 and 4800 baud.
Sure.
It was very slow. Conventional wisdom was that this was a text-based medium. This was not about images, and certainly not about sight, sound, and motion. That was just not going to be a thing. It was thought to be, well, it's okay for books, but not for much else. And certainly you wouldn't buy anything that was of value like art. I mean, who would buy something like that online? That's crazy. So I basically discovered very quickly no books to read, and certainly anything that I would read was immediately out of date right away. I realized that I was going to have to write code. We were going to have a very strong technology team to build what we needed. Nobody was moving fast enough to solve the challenges, and I knew we were going to burn cash. That was very clear in the beginning. And so it's like, okay, what's critical mass? What will it take for this to become a commercially viable marketing channel? And I essentially put my finger on a calendar and said, well, the fourth quarter of 1998, if I can survive till the fourth quarter of 98, that'll be enough time to be able to have enough credit cards in use online, email addresses, the speed of the modems, where at the time when I first started, it took 26 seconds to load a homepage full of JPEGs for an art-related website. Well, that wasn't going to last, and how many clicks would it take? So there was a lot that had to happen. So I was very lucky. I got started in 1997. By the fourth quarter of 98, modems were 28.8. There were a lot of email addresses and credit cards being used. We'd had a lot of traffic to the website, fortunately. But the day after Thanksgiving of 98, we did 500 orders that day. And
Wow.
that was really for us, and I think for many people, that first Friday after Thanksgiving in that year was the beginning of what turned out to be a hell of an industry. And I have been at it, basically fighting for return on marketing investment ever since.
It's amazing. I actually recently had on the founder of Blue Nile, and we got into a very fun conversation about those early days of building the web. You know, what you said, and again, I like for especially younger listeners to hear, like, we had to convince people it was okay to use your credit card on the internet. And there are probably still a few, I just read about they're finally shutting down AOL dial-up.
Yes, they're down to 176, 178,000 subscribers.
But even that, by the way, blows my mind. Like 178,000 people in 2025 pay a monthly fee for a dial-up access to the internet. It's amazing.
Yep. Very often, those of us that are on the bleeding edge of these things tend to look ahead, and we tend to underestimate how long some generations of technology will wind up lasting. And I have seen this many times in my career, where you'll see both companies and individuals who are holding on to something where you're like, why are they doing that? There's such a better way to do something, but they will hold on and hold on and hold on, particularly if they think that it's going to be less expensive or if they would have to pay more for something. But it happens. In any event, for us, it was for my wife and I, it was very straightforward. It took a little bit to get investors enthusiastic, and then once they began to see the traction, it was a whole new ball game.
Amazing. Now, were you part, because I know a lot of the very well named .com startups that were buying domains and all those kind of things. Was there any special story around that journey for that company?
Yeah, sort of a painful one for me, but we got through it just fine. Our business didn't start out as art.com. Our original URL was artuframe.com. And artuframe.com is nice, but it's not as memorable as art.com. So the business plan that I wrote said that we would acquire art.com as a domain and URL and switch to it, and that it would be one of the use of proceeds for investment. So I raised our investment capital. We go to the first board meeting, and during the first half hour of the first board meeting, there's a discussion associated with the use of the funds that we've raised, and it's time to spend some of that money. So being a good CEO, I asked my board to vote on the use of the proceeds, and whereupon they said, well, we have some different ideas than what you had in your plan. And in particular, one board member, whose name will go unmentioned, said, we don't need art.com. It doesn't matter what your URL is. Just use what you've got, or if you want to change to something else, but we're not going to spend money for a domain. That's crazy. Why would we do something like that? Now, that sounds crazy now, but back then, the most successful e-commerce company was not Amazon. It was eBay. And who knew what an eBay was?
Right. That's right. They were bigger at first for a long time, actually.
So from my perspective, A, 3 letters, the name art.com is the category. I didn't set out to build a print and poster company. I set out to build something much bigger than that.
Mm.
To me, it was obvious, on top of which there was an enormous amount of traffic that was coming to that URL. And at that time, art.com stood for Advanced Rotorcraft Technology.
Of course, the old Rotorcraft. It's a household name.
It turns out art.com was one of the original URLs that was claimed during the ARPANET by a helicopter consulting firm doing work for the Defense Department. And they had that as their domain and their email. And so part of the challenge in getting the name was to convince the owner of that domain to agree to give it up. And I said, well, we can give you a perpetual right, if you'd like, on the use of the email. But think of all that wasted traffic. And what a nuisance. Let me see if I can free you of the burden of having such a high demand domain.
Well, that was very helpful of you.
Wherever I can be of help, that's what I try. And of course, it did cost us some money, and the board promptly voted against buying the domain. And for those of you who are CEOs or would-be CEOs, let me just tell you that in the same way that the customer is always right until they're wrong, your board members are always right until they're wrong. And one of the challenges for you as a leader is not necessarily to be in lockstep with your board all the time. If you have a strong point of view and you're prepared to both defend it and take the consequences of what's going to come. In this particular case, I prevailed, and it turned out to be a pretty good idea. We put it to work right away, and it began producing a return on investment immediately in the first 24 hours. So that turned out to be important. But if the rest of the business wasn't performing, that really wouldn't much have mattered. So we were very fortunate.
That's awesome. And so for those who are less familiar than another old guy like myself, give us the brief, the 30 seconds or less history of what the arc of art.com was like.
Oh, well, it's been an interesting story. It's changed hands a few times. It's now owned by Walmart. But I had sold the business to Getty Images in that next year, May 5th of 99. It was bought by Getty Images. Getty decided about 5 days after they bought the business that they really wanted to be B2B and not B2C for a variety of reasons. Determined that they were going to then sell art.com, which they ultimately did, but not for another year. And I exited the scene. They sold the business. The business was bought in a roll-up, bad pun, of other poster businesses. And it went through rounds of financing and eventually was sold to Walmart. And today it sits inside of Walmart. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So let's now go to you're at Getty, and you've had what we'll just call a pretty phenomenal .com like experience, or whatever version that was for you. What did this make you want to do? Did you want to go get right back up to bat and try again? Or what was your next feeling of a next step?
Well, I can tell you, I wrote a business plan for .comming state and local government. The next step was that I wrote the plan, recruited the team, raised the money, and took a back seat because I had no interest in running that business. And that became a significant business, which was then sold just a few years later to a very large public company in defense and consulting. Let's see. I made a mistake. This would not be the first, as my wife would tell you, and not the last. But I jumped right into doing the next thing.
Okay.
I went to work investing in some other startups and investing some money. And I didn't become an operator right away. I really sort of got busy working with family members and supporting other people in their dreams. And eventually that took me into going back into entrepreneurship, which was kind of natural for me. So at that point, I had worked for a couple of others. So I worked on Wall Street. I had worked as a divisional CEO for Getty.
So you're at an interesting sort of point in your career because you've had real world accomplishments, right? You've had a real exit. You've tasted all of that vibe of what it takes to get it all done. And you decided, like, let's go do that again.
Yes. Well, it's been several times. So since then, there have been 3 more exits of businesses that I've operated, been an investor in quite a few, and I'm currently operating 2 businesses, an Inc. 5000 professional services business that does consulting and managed services, onshore, offshore, iSocrates. And then the latest, which is AI, MadTech AI, which really was spawned out of iSocrates from what we've learned the last 10 years, specifically in marketing, advertising, data analytics using AI. And so we're riding 2 ponies at the moment, and it seems to be going pretty well.
And at any point, I know you've also spent time in the agency side of life. Was there any time where you even remotely thought about like going away from entrepreneurship and just saying, I like big company life, or I want to be an investor full time? I'm sure you could have been a VC by this point.
So that was a direction I could have gone. I had no intention of going to WPP or going into the agency world. What happened was that a friend of mine took a very nice job at a big business that ultimately became part of WPP, where I had a project. I had sold one of my businesses and I had a book contract to write 3 books for John Wiley on real estate, specifically real estate investing and property management. So, as apropos of nothing, I was using excess funds, being mildly successful as a real estate investor.
Okay.
Around the U.S. I was buying property tax liens, tax deeds, mortgages, all kinds of things. And I had been writing notes to myself for years about things that I was learning. Gee, I wish I could have read this somewhere. I wish I knew this before I did such and such, or I learned how to do this the best way. So I had all these notes. And I had been doing some landlording and investing. Anyway, John Wiley had an editor who said, you had really great experience. You should write about this. Let me give you a contract. They don't do this anymore in publishing. Let me give you a 6-figure advance as a first-time author.
Wow.
Write about something that is your avocation, real estate investing and landlording. And so I had sold a business, and I'm busy getting ready to write these 3 books, which I've just taken this very substantial advance on. And a buddy of mine takes this job, and he said, you're really good at this. He goes, I don't know why you're not running businesses. Would you do me a favor? Would you please write my 100-day plan for me? I'm really busy, and you really understand this stuff very well, and you know this business. Why don't you write the plan? So I write the plan for him. I said, okay, but I'm really busy writing these books. Just write the plan for me. So I met him at a Starbucks in West Lake Forest, Illinois, in the end of February of 2008. I remember distinctly, handed him his, whatever, I think it was a 12-page single-spaced plan for how to execute his 100 days. He takes one look at it, looks at me, he goes, I knew I had the right guy. He rips it in half, hands one half of it to me. I'm like, what did you just do? And he goes, yeah, this is way more than what one person can do. He said, here, you execute this part and I'll execute this part. I'm like, hey, I have 3 books to write and I'm on I don't have time for this. They hired you for this. And he says, no. If they knew about you, they would have hired you instead of me, but they didn't. So they hired me and now I'm hiring you. And I'm like, no, I don't have time for this. And he said, I'll pay you a very substantial 6-figure number. And I said, oh, that's a lot more than the advance on the book.
All of a sudden you had a little time.
And he goes, so I knew I had the right guy. He said, okay. So he said, handshake, shook her hand. He said, I need you in Boston on, I think it was the 28th of February. I said, why? He said, well, now that I joined this company, the first order of business is that we just acquired a company and I need you to write the integration plan and help me figure out what the hell this is. And I'm like, I just told you I have these books that I have to write. He goes, you know what? You're well organized. You'll figure it out. Just go do it. And that became the next 100 days, was writing those 3 books, doing the due diligence for him on his new empire, figuring out what was going on in these business units, which were spread across North America, and then spending, if I remember correctly, 2 solid days, roughly almost, I think it's 15 or 16 hours with his boss who flew in from Europe to give him the detail of what we had learned in the first 100 days and what the action plan needed to be going forward. So anyway, that business then got promptly acquired by WPP. It was a very large, multi-billion dollar business. Gets bought in a hostile takeover by WPP. My
Whoa.
my buddy exits the scene, but the WPP guys are like, well, we don't do consultants, and you're apparently very good. Why don't you come and join us? So by then, I had already written the books, turned them in the fall of 2008, there was a little problem in financial markets. But by then, I already had written the books and gotten my advance and banked it. Whereupon we entered into the worst market for real estate book sales in the history of real estate book sales. And I wound up being on the executive team at Kantar and then at WPP. And that was the next 4 years, and eventually spun out of there to go build my own businesses again. So I was sort of a reluctant agency guy. I wound up working for Kantar, ultimately reporting to senior global leadership for Kantar, based out of New York, but reporting to London. And then at the same time, I worked for Mark Reed on the WPP digital board, doing deals and due diligence. And he wound up as the CEO of WPP. So you never know in life, kind of what might happen at 3 o'clock in the morning when your wife shoves you in the ribs, or your friend calls you and asks you for help. I've had a lot of those experiences, and similarly, now it's 2025 and AI is the bee's knees, and this is a great period of time to be building a B2B SaaS AI business. But I can look back over this tortured, twisting career and say, yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things that particularly get applied. In our case, we work in decision intelligence, marketing decision intelligence more specifically. And I can look back and say, yeah, I'm glad I have the finance and investment background to appreciate, and having spent my own money as a marketer, to appreciate the fact that most marketing doesn't work most of the time. And you really need to work hard at trying to figure out how to make better decisions. And I've got literally decades. You guys can't see it with this shirt, but there's scar tissue, back there.
I know that feeling. I think it's also really interesting as I've been talking to people and finding those, in similar age demographic brackets that are starting startups here in this AI first era. And so many of us seem to be doing something that is different than everything we've done before, but built on top of the backs of everything we've done before. Like, I've never built a creation tool, but I spent 30 years building video consumption tools. And let's face it, there's only so many patterns to be recognized around video storytelling. Mm-hmm. Similarly, it seems like that finance background combined with an agency background set you up to be able to take sort of any angle around MarTech and do something really interesting. How did you settle on what you are in fact doing today? Or if you started on some other thing and went through some crazy pivot, what was the first thing you did and why'd you pivot?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a pivot. What I would say is we've been doing professional services at a very high level of execution in terms of quality and intensity for a long time. I'm very fortunate to work with a partner who's our country manager in India, where she and I have built teams that have been extremely successful, performing on behalf of both marketers and agencies and data tech suppliers to the industry and media companies. So I think for us, it's not a pivot. It's more like we have seen the problems. We recognize the gaps in the solutions that exist in the market. We built solutions for ourselves to use internally with our customers. AI has produced a whole new set of challenges and opportunities where we had to rip up and replace several times because of the changes in architecture that have been required. But I wouldn't say it's a pivot. I would say this is the natural. I think this happens in many industries. You learn things in doing things, in tasks that are being done. And those are things that today in an AI world can be automated and should be automated. So I don't think for us, I don't think it's a pivot. We wanted to get to products. The challenge is that if you're any good at services, what happens is your customers consume you. You get sucked up in their problems, you become extremely reliable, and your world is their world. You wake up in the morning and their problems are your problems, and you're thinking about them and working on them throughout the day. And for me in the evening. And after a while, it's like, okay, I keep seeing the same challenges over and over and over again. And
Right.
some of these are really tedious, not exciting, but necessary. In my case, I tend to work less in the creative area and more in data and analytics. And to be candid with you, most of the data that people are working with in media and marketing, sales, and other related data, it's not in good shape. This data needs to get cleaned up and organized. It needs to be unified, transformed, and before you ever get a chance to do anything really sexy with it. And that's something that we chose to own a long time ago. And it's not sexy, but it's important. And it turns out that that's really been the genesis of a lot of the really interesting things we've been able to do in AI. Because AI, it's it's garbage in, garbage out. If you can't get the data right, very hard to be able to get these wonderful outcomes.
Well, I think that's well said, and I know one thing that we also sort of we come from a school of the do the work philosophy, right? You've got to get enough ground knowledge, ground effort, whatever it's going to be able to go do a given thing. And I also agree on that garbage in, garbage out. But for someone who might be listening and not really understand why you're saying that the world of data is such a mess for people, could you give one or two little sort of simple examples that someone would relate to? Yeah.
In one case, imagine that you are a marketer or an agency working with marketers' data, and it's what's called first-party deterministic data. So let's say it's customer data. It could be information about this person that might be personally identifiable, like their name, address, phone number, their email address. It could be purchase data. There could be other data that's associated with them as an identity or their behavior. Well, a lot of times companies aren't spending enough effort making sure that that data is actually correct. Is it current? Is it in the right fields? Is it set up properly?
Is this why 1 in every 10 ads I see on YouTube is in Spanish?
Yeah, I'm getting those for sure. I always turn to my wife and say something in Spanish to her and say, when I'm not looking, are you watching the Spanish programs? Is that how this is happening?
Well, I'm really confused because I speak French and I don't understand. I wish I did, but I don't understand Spanish. So I don't know what I could have clicked on that would get them.
Let's say there's a very, very high level of imprecision, sort of poor accuracy and poor precision around a lot of data. And a lot of the things that I've done in this industry that have been noteworthy basically started from some pretty crap data. I won't go through the whole thing, but at every turn in the last 27 years, there have been moments where the outcomes could have been dramatically better, but for the fact that the original data that we started with, whether it was personally identifiable or not, was messed up. Another example is, let's say you've got good data, but you're mapping the fields in the wrong way, so that when you're trying to be able to get to, let's say, a model of performance, that you're not working with the right inputs. And it's not because the quality wasn't there, it's because it didn't get put in the right place in order for the formulas to be able to be set. And that happens very, very often. So the whole thing takes too much time. It often takes data engineers or ETL developers, data warehouse architects, data scientists, marketing scientists, people with specialized skills. Very often they had to go get certifications, a lot of training. But why? We shouldn't have to do that. For the vast majority of the things that are
Hmm.
necessary analytically to make better decisions, both buy side and sell side, you shouldn't have to have that much training. So, my starting point is, let's see if we can cut the amount of time that it takes to do these things. Let's see if we can identify mistakes or challenges early on and suss them out and say, hey, here's an anomaly. Something's wrong. What's the root cause of it? Can we self-heal it? Can we fix it within the code itself so you never see it? Or if
Right.
there is a problem, that you're going to get alerted and you have some idea of what might be causing it. So we
And
work extremely hard on that front end piece.
so, Bill, when was it your identification of, oh my gosh, so much crappy data, to use my own version of it, was that the origin point on this one? Was it you're watching this world of everybody's using AI and et cetera, and you can predict the future, that if we don't clean people's data, they're just going to make bigger and bigger messes in the future? Like, was there a clear, identifiable thing in your head?
Yes, 7 years ago. It didn't happen with AI, happened before that.
Okay.
What I saw was the predominant experience, the behavior of make goods, that is, agencies making errors or publishers making errors where they owe money or credits to customers because
Mm-hmm.
of mistakes being made that could have been caught and certainly couldn't have been caught much earlier. Overspend, underspend, failure to meet KPIs, failure to take advantage of opportunities to make more money where something's really working, but nobody's saying, hey, you're only buying 10% of the available inventory to get you to this outcome. You need to double, triple, quadruple your spending right now. This is working. There's a whole series of things like that. And it happened for us 7 years ago. And I saw both the losses, the waste, and the amount of labor that was going into things. And I'm like, yeah, this is all can be automated. Now, I wasn't thinking AI, I was thinking automation. What happened was that we went from machine learning and natural language processing in elements of AI in
Right.
completely new opportunities with the presence of cloud based LLMs and sort of the democratization of a lot of the AI tools. What we discovered was we could take an agentic AI approach and essentially go to work on the individual tasks and begin to build what turned out to be smaller amounts of code that could be essentially compounded to work
Yeah.
on these individual tasks across different platforms, different kinds of challenges. There isn't one or two, we're talking about dozens of different kinds of problems to be solved. But what happened for us was we saw it internally within our business where we're doing planning and buying of media, building models, cleaning people's data, where it's like, oh, there's a lot of room for automation here. We just kept working on it for ourselves. And then basically the LLMs burst on the scene, and it became clear that we could take an agentic approach. One of the things that we started doing right away was where can code write code or where can code test code? So all of a sudden, we don't need as many developers. We didn't need as many QA people. We could actually accelerate what we were doing, and we could put our money into more data science, marketing science, higher end help. And pretty quickly, it changed the shape of the organization. In our case, we basically are today operating at about half as many headcount. It's about half as much as it was at the peak.
Wow.
As a business rank, it's because of the extreme automation we could apply to media and marketing.
So we both were at this startup that we're both doing prior to the whatever we're going to call it, the LLM revolution. One day someone will coin the term, and that someone will write a book, and we'll be like, oh, that's what we're going to call it all. Maybe it'll be you. How quickly and what were the signature moments? How quickly did you react to the LLM takeover? For us, when ChatGPT burst on the scene, it was a very quick realization of things we could start using the OpenAI backend APIs and LLMs for. But what's interesting for us is so much of what we did was, pre-LLM AI work that actually became pretty unnecessary in the post. So I'm curious, what were the triggers that got you guys, especially got your brain like, oh my gosh, we could do different things?
Okay. First thing is, I'm not going to take credit for anything. What happened was the youngest people in our company jumped on it first.
Okay.
And they weren't using it for the kinds of problems that we're talking about. They were using it for things like figuring out content, taglines,
Hmm.
logos, graphic. It was not analytical purposes. They were using it for completely different use cases. And they were
Okay.
extremely excited about the whole thing.
Sure.
And I'm like, I see where this is going. Kind of like, my seeing, hey, if books are going to be big, what other categories? And I said, okay, they're all
So,
looking at,
so you were the bony elbow in the middle of the night this time.
yeah, kind of specifically, I was asking questions of the team in India about how can we apply this to
Mm.
things that are extremely labor intensive. So we already had been putting in automation. I think probably the first big aha moment for us had to do with building data connectors, ETL transformation of data. and also the end of BI as we know it. So, like a lot of companies, we were using, and our customers were using traditional business intelligence tools of various kinds,
Sure.
building dashboards, and that was a pretty significant amount of labor that we were putting into that. And I would say the two things that we ran into right away was we can we can automate a bunch of the data connections that we need, because not just because we could, but because we had so many scripts that we had built over so many years in terms of the transformations. We just had a
Okay.
really good understanding of how do you automate this part of a process that's normally very labor intensive. And then on the BI side, it was really, does it have to be this way? Do we have to have so many bodies and take so long? And do we have to spend so much money on third party business intelligence software that we're so dependent on? But our clients were moving much slower in adopting this. Overall, they're
Right.
like, oh, well, I really like my Power BI, my Tableau. Got my team of engineers who, support me in data. And I don't, why do we have to make a change? And so in the beginning, I had challenges more externally than internally of customers saying, why do we have to make any change? This is working fine the way it is. But so I was looking for early adopters. And what
Okay.
happened for us going into 2025 is we began to identify more and more early adopters who would say, yeah, AI, okay, I know that's a thing. Can you make us more money? And then that became really replaced very quickly with, can you save us time and money on labor?
It's fascinating you say that, because the number of times I've seen that pattern occur where actually the you and I might have the optics like you can use AI to do these things, and so much of it it's like actually just help us save money, right? Or how do we make this smaller and
Right.
it,
How do I sell it to the CFO? Some of the early conversations were, you sold me. I know we need this. Now help me to sell my CFO. Help me to get my CEO to understand how important this is. And in 2025, making more money has been less of concern to the customers and much more concerning is, hey, can you reduce the amount of labor intensity for our organization in getting this stuff turned around for us? Can you help us to find opportunities for improvement quickly that are measurable? Whatever money we put into this, we got to get that money back in like 6 months or a year, no longer than that. And
wow.
we're not even sure if we can do it in a year. Well, I got lucky. The first two instances that we wound up selling for MadTech AI, the first customer said, oh, this means I don't have to hire as many people because all this can be automated. A company said, um, our margins are a little bit tight. New business has been slow to come in. I really can't afford to spend as much money on data engineering, ETL, data warehouse. I know you have this incredible decision intelligence stuff, but if we could somehow get control of the data situation quickly, that would really give me fast payback. And we got lucky because the CIO of that agency, unusually, is also the chief financial officer. You don't see that very often.
Oh yeah, that's a weird combo.
After 30 days, he called me and he said, okay, I'm a believer. How do we invest? And I'm like, you paid for a 3-year subscription. God bless you.
Right.
You're invested. And he's like, no, I mean, invest. He said, we just paid back the entire cost of this commitment based on what you just did in the first 30 days. So
Amazing.
for us, it's got to be even bigger for bigger companies and for plenty of other businesses. So how do we get more involved? And God bless them. They became an first investor, number one. Number two, that was just on the data and analytics before we even get to the decision intelligence. So we're fortunate.
Bill, you and I are talking a language that many of my listeners do speak. There's also a few folks out there who might not have been able to follow everything we're talking about. Can you, just for those folks out there, can you define what MadTech AI is in the language that they'll be able to follow and possibly be interested in your services? And we'll go on from there.
Sure, you bet. I think the first thing is that we are a software as a service solution. It's a platform. It's made up of a series of modules that are pre-built. Those modules include iPaaS, which is the data and analytics that we're talking about. Imagine hundreds of data connectors with all of the tools that you need to transform the data. And there's a free data warehouse. The next piece of it is around providing hundreds of data models that are pre-built for all different parts of this industry with full visualization. There's a ton of AI that's baked into this. You could call this the next generation of reporting and analytics and data handling, but it's something a little bit different. We think that there's a box here where there's a hole in the market, and we would call this marketing decision intelligence. So imagine a brain that sits on top of the tech stack, sits above the level of a CDP or CRM and email and things like demand side platforms, email systems. And it's intended to be able, just like your brain, to be able to ingest data, process it, come up with better decisions, and then send those instructions in various ways down to be executed in those enablement platforms. So that's
I
what
think
it is. It's a platform.
I think that's great. Unfortunately, I still don't think my mom's going to be one of your customers, but hopefully some of the rest. Bill, you've accomplished so much in your career. You haven't slowed down. You're still at it, doing amazing things. Regardless of MadTech, how do you personally define success at this stage in life?
Well, let's see. I think success at this point would be I'd love to see other people be able to join the business and tell the story and be able to execute. We've had a lot of hard work on relatively few shoulders. A lot of us are twofers and threefers. So success, I think, right now would be to see if we could leverage ourselves, getting some help from others. I'd love to be able to have more success stories. There's a point in building these businesses where traction takes on a great deal of meaning and support for the rest of what you want to do. We know that we've built something really special. It's working consistently well. We'd like to be able to have more success for people, be able to tell more great stories about how well they're doing. And then I think for myself, I'm all in. My kids are raised. I'm completely committed to what I'm doing, but I'd like to do it at bigger scale. We didn't build something that's English language based. It's global in nature, and I'd like to see MadTech AI scale.
I love that answer. That's really great. Bill, when people want to come find you on the internet, where should we send them?
Well, so first of all, we are MadTech AI, madtech.ai, Marketing Decision Intelligence. My email is bill.l@madtech.ai. And don't be confused. We have a sister company called iSocrates. That's our professional services business. Jeremy, I want to thank you for taking the time on this. I wasn't expecting to go over so much of my journey. I don't get to tell that story very often. It's probably very boring to my own children. So thank you for the opportunity. Maybe someday my grandkids will see this.
I think you had a great story to tell. I'm sure with another hour, I could get even more great stories out of there. But thank you for giving me your time today, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.